Hello, welcome everyone. I'd like to give people just a couple more minutes to join before we get started. Just another minute before we should be ready to kick things off. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. Before our presenters begin, I want to share a few quick tips so you can get the most out of your webinar experience. Located on the right, you'll see your control panel. This is where you'll find your audio and questions sections. In the audio section, you can choose to tune in using your computer's connected speakers or audio devices, or by dialing in on your phone. Below that is the questions section. We encourage you to submit any questions or comments you may have during the presentation by typing them here. We'll address those during the Q&A session at the end. Finally, there will be live poll questions for you to take part of throughout the webinar, and we'd like to thank you in advance for your participation in those. Now it's time for me to turn it over to our presenter, John Casadanti, our Senior Product Marketing Manager. The mic is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for spending your hour here with us to discuss this important topic. You can tell by the number of registrations and the attention that people are giving this particular topic that there's some high concern or high interest in what can happen with Wi-Fi 7 in your networks. The title of our webinar today is The Perfect Storm or The Perfect Opportunity. And the idea behind that title is that how disruptive will Wi-Fi 7 be, implementing it into your network, or does this really transfer into more of an opportunity to differentiate and expand your service opportunities, your service markets, to draw in more customers? So we're going to go through the conversation that's going to include a few topics. Mainly, I want to make sure that we want to cover three different key areas. First, we're going to talk briefly about market dynamics. Then the three key areas that we're going to discuss are the technology itself. Perhaps most of you are familiar with Wi-Fi 7, have done some reading on your own, but we're going to go through a little bit more detail and separate Wi-Fi 7s from previous versions of the standard. Next, we'll talk a little bit about how this technology gets implemented into your network and what changes, or if anything changes, within your network, within your MOPS, within the processes that your customer service people will have to react to for any type of support for your customers. And then finally, we're going to have a short discussion about ideas of bringing Wi-Fi 7 to market and some of the positioning that you can choose to do. So as Sunny mentioned, my name is John Casadanti. I work in the product marketing area for the Unlimited Subscriber Systems, which was previously known as Revenue Edge. Joining me today on the call are George Wong, who is our Vice President of Product Line Management. He specifically looks after all of our Wi-Fi development. Bob Carrick, who many of you probably recognize or know. Bob is our advocate, our customer advocate, not only for you, but also for our subscribers. And his consultation, I'm sure you'll appreciate from his perspective of interacting with many of you. Likewise, Megan Powell is joining us. She's the Regional Vice President for Success from our services organization. Many of you probably have already interacted with Megan and her team's assistance in providing guidance on how to bring or discuss new services, new capabilities to your subscribers. So I'm going to start off the conversation by talking a little bit about the dynamics of what we're dealing with Wi-Fi. So first and foremost, I want to be able to illustrate or showcase a question and ask that question personally to each of you, like who benefits from Wi-Fi 7? I think there's two different ways to look at that question. One is the reality is all of us are going to benefit from Wi-Fi 7. Wi-Fi technology, as it's blossomed over the years, has constantly shown improvements and capabilities that we all are now very familiar with and can put our hands around. But we also see this as we don't necessarily appreciate all the details. It's very similar to when you update your Android or your iOS phone. You basically hit the button to say upload it. I think very rarely do people really go in and look at the updates that were included within those updates. You just move on and you expect things to work the same moving forward. And that's what standards give you in this particular case. Things will continue to work. But specifically, there are areas of subscribers and applications that are going to see huge benefits from Wi-Fi 7. And as you look at the screen from left to right, here are a few ideas for you to consider. Number one, anybody that's looking after or needing high bandwidth, low latency types of applications running on their machines, whether that be at home or at business. That's certainly one of the biggest factors that you'll see in Wi-Fi 7. For those of us that spend a great deal of time at home and who struggle with connectivity in terms of consistent performance, consistent high quality video, we're not on video right now, but if we were, it would be very dependent on how all of us are connecting into the network. So there will be an area of Wi-Fi 7 that also pick up in terms of the quality and the overall experience we have in doing immersive collaboration. And finally, for businesses that are continually offering Wi-Fi within their walls, the number of users, the different type of applications that are running, Wi-Fi 7 has a much larger capacity in its capability set to be able to address those particular opportunities. Next, I want to give you two different views. Number one, so looking at the top half of this slide, let's talk about it from a broadband provider's perspective. So first, all of you should be congratulated as fiber delivery vehicles for internet. That number is growing pretty dramatically, and you can see even the number that I found was only a year old. It's about a year old, and over 41% of the broadband connections in North America are considered to be are considered to be glass fiber connected directly to your subscribers. The other data point here to look at is the growth in the amount of bandwidth that is being utilized, and this is across all broadband connections. So it will exceed 700 gigabits. I did a presentation earlier this year where it started out at 544. About through mid-April, it rose to 600 plus, and the expectation at 700, I think, is just a no-brainer. It will go way past that. So you, as a provider, are dealing with a situation as you grow your market. You're also seeing your subscribers grow in the amount of bandwidth they're going to utilize. So it's a concept of if you build it, they will come. On the bottom half of the slide is more of the conversation around the subscribers. So what's changing with the subscribers? Sure, there are devices that we all use typically, or PCs, set-top boxes for streaming video. Any of those sorts of devices are going to increasingly draw more traffic and offer more demand on the network. In this particular case, this data point is pointing to the idea of smart connected devices. Years ago, we used to talk about this as IoT, and we still probably refer to it as IoT, but not as much. At this point, though, we're looking at over 57% of the households connected via broadband are utilizing some kind of smart connected device. And then in the United States specifically, the average number, not the largest or not the smallest, but the average number is 21 connected devices. That number is about the same as it was last year, but we're seeing a bigger mix in terms of the device categories that are being used for smart connections or smart devices. So if you look on the right-hand side, you can see the number one concern for subscribers in the area of safety and security and in-home monitoring. So not only are we seeing a change in how you guys are addressing your market, but we're also seeing a change and an expansion of how people are using their internet connectivity to service their households or businesses and maybe even out the outdoors. So another observation here to illustrate, and this one's a little fun to discuss. Many of you have been in the marketplace for quite some time and delivering services for quite some time. Maybe you haven't thought about this particular perspective. Many Wi-Fi devices are still in play. And even prior to 2019, when it was released, there are still devices that are supporting things like Wi-Fi 4 single band that are active in the networks and are projected to stay active within the network. Next, what we see is, we had a change in evolution to Wi-Fi 5, we went to Wi-Fi 6, then we went to Wi-Fi 6 dual band, and you can see that particular label in the graph showing that we're now seeing a high adoption and continue to see a high adoption of Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 7 started to take hold, I should say, in 2023, marginally when it was announced, and then in 2024, we're seeing a pickup. What's interesting in the graph, though, is you're seeing the decrease in 6E devices in lieu of market share to Wi-Fi 7. And I did an analogy for everybody at the very bottom of the page, assuming that either we're mainly iOS or Android. I know there's a mix of Linux-based devices that are out there, but this primarily is a world of iOS and Android. You can almost track exactly what happened with the number of devices that are appearing in our marketplace based on when they released capability sets to control the Wi-Fi standard. So if you go all the way out to Wi-Fi 6E, you're looking at 2023 for iOS, and then a quick turnaround to Wi-Fi 7. For those of you that are Apple fans, the expectation in September is Wi-Fi 7 is going to be announced. So the other part of this storyline is backwards compatibility. That's one of the things that I'm sure that George will be talking to in his presentation. But it is all about investment protection, and that's what Wi-Fi standards offer you. So before I turn it over to George, I wanted to ask of you to respond to this poll, and Sunny's going to push the poll out to you guys right now. So I'm very interested in where you stand on Wi-Fi 7, whether this is still an investigative time frame. Is this something that you don't expect to roll out anytime soon? If it's something that you see in the near future, this is all important to us as we navigate our own systems and solutions to you as our customers. Wi-Fi 7 has been in discussion for quite some time, and evolutionary, this technology actually has not been ratified yet, but has been in place since the early part of 2024 in an official way. Ratification is expected at the end of this year. So your feedback is really helpful, and I think we'll go ahead and push the results when you're ready, Sunny, just to get a really quick flavor of how people are reacting. All right, so currently undecided by far is the winner here, and the others, pretty evenly matched across the board. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. I think that will play into some of our conversation here. And with that, I'll turn it over to George Wong.
Good morning from California, everyone. As a person working in the Wi-Fi industry for many years, Wi-Fi still seems like magic to me. Let's go to the next slide. As you can see, more than 2 decades ago, the first Wi-Fi standard was 11B, and that started in 1997. And back then, we were getting a whopping 10 megabit per second. 2.5 decades later, now we have 46 gig, okay? So that's 4,600 times more bandwidth compared to 1997. Now, one interesting thing I want to point out on this chart is that, as you can see, almost every generation of Wi-Fi lasts about 5 to 6 years before the next generation Wi-Fi comes in, okay? So we look at Wi-Fi 7 starts in earnest, let's say second half of 2024, as John was showing in his chart, maybe early 2025. Then that would point to the fact that Wi-Fi 7 is going to last until 2029 to 2030, okay? So that's a long span of selling cycle for us. So why Wi-Fi 7? Well, I'm going to go through some slides with you to show you some of the substantial benefits and hopefully get you to see why Wi-Fi 7 is so exciting. One last thing I want to point out is that every generation of Wi-Fi is backward compatible, okay? So if you deploy Wi-Fi 7, it would be backward compatible with all the other generation, even all the way to 11B, okay? Go to the next slide. Now, you know, some of you might have already attended some other seminars on Wi-Fi 7, and you saw the, you know, key features such as 320 megahertz 4K QAM and MLO and so on and so forth, right? So every one of these features are very interesting and very useful. What I want to do today, though, is really take you behind the scene and talk about some of the big hitter features, okay, out of Wi-Fi 7. So why don't we go to the next slide? So this, in some ways, is a tablet format of what Wi-Fi 7 is, okay? So you could see that from Wi-Fi 6 to 6E to 7, lots and lots of improvement. I think, John, if you could hit the return one more time. Yeah, so you could see that the big hitter really is at 320 megahertz and 4K QAM. When you implement these two features, 320 megahertz and 4K QAM, you get 2.9 gig of bandwidth per stream, okay? So when you look at Wi-Fi 6 6E compared to Wi-Fi 7, we're talking about almost 2.5 times more bandwidth, okay? And that's really what's gonna give you that big punch in terms of multi-home, multi-gig coverage, excuse me, whole home multi-gig coverage. Why don't you press the return button one more time? The second big hitter I see is the AFC. Okay, for some of you, this may not be something that you're familiar with, automated frequency coordination. We're going to talk about that. Okay, and when I talk about it, you're going to see why it is a big hitter out of all of them. One more time, return. And then the last one is not in the 802.11be standard per se, but some routers like the Calix product can support actually 240 megahertz channel on a 5 gigahertz. Now, you might have known that the 5 gigahertz typically support up to 160 megahertz, but in this case, we can actually support 240 megahertz. So I'm going to talk about that also. So let's go to the next slide. So this is what I call big hitter number one, right? So if you look at the 6 gigahertz channels, right, you obviously can do almost 60 channels of 20 megahertz, right, 59 channels. And then you go all the way, I'm talking about the left-hand chart right now. And then you go all the way down to the bottom. You can see that in Wi-Fi 7, we can actually support 3 of the 320 megahertz. That is a super wide channel, okay? So if you take that and combine with 4K QAM, what do you get? Well, you can see that in the MCS index table, right? So for example, if we pick MCS 11, that's still 1K QAM. When you go to MCS 13, that's where Wi-Fi 7, actually, yeah, Wi-Fi 7 comes in. And at MCS 13, you can see it's 2.9 gig of bandwidth. Now in this particular case, you can see that the table is showing 2 streams transmitting at 160 megahertz. But if you imagine one stream transmitting at 320 megahertz, it's the same amount of bandwidth. So as I said before, even a single stream can transmit at 2.9 gig. So majority of the Wi-Fi 7 router on the 6 gigahertz has a 4x4, and just like the Calix product. So just on the 6 gigahertz alone, you can transmit more than 11 gig of bandwidth. Okay, that's how you get so much bandwidth. Not that many years ago, people were excited about getting 1 gig through the house, right? Now we're talking about more than 20 gigs when you combine all 3 bands together. Let's go to the next slide. So as I was saying before that, people are not very familiar with AFC. So the one challenge in 6 gigahertz is that there are actually a bunch of incumbents already in the 6 gigahertz, okay? You could see in this list, right, depending on Uni 5, 6, 7, or 8, there are different kinds of incumbents in there. Now, one of the things you could see in the Uni 5, it has the most number of incumbents. On the right-hand side, you can see the number of incumbents, right? The reason behind that is because it's the widest channel out of all the units. You can see that it's 500 megahertz, right? So big wide channels. So that's why a lot of incumbents jump on that channel. And then all the way to Uni 8. One thing to understand is that these incumbents are basically spread everywhere, right? Meaning if the Navy has a incumbency, they might be specifically to one location. So for example, if they are incumbent in Philadelphia, right, in the harbor area, they may not be an incumbent in middle of Montana, right? So what that means is that you have to find where the open channels are, right? Hit the return one more time. So you could see that when you're transmitting at 6 gigahertz, depending on whether you're indoor or outdoor, on the green bar, if you're transmitting 6 gigahertz on the indoor, you can transmit at low power, okay? However, if you want to transmit a standard power, which is 6 dB higher, you would need to query the AFC database, okay? Why don't you click the return one more time? So what is AFC? AFC stands for Automated Frequency Coordination, right? What that does is basically it's a service provided that it would take your geolocation information and basically search the FCC database to find what the open channels are, and then give you that information. And based on the open channel, that's when you can transmit a standard power. Okay. So if we go to the next slide, it'll be much clearer. So you can see there are many ways to identify your geolocation, right? You can actually put a GPS in the unit. For indoor products, sometimes it doesn't work that well. For outdoor products, certainly is a good idea. So, but there are other ways to find your geolocation. For example, your cell phone already have GPS, Wi-Fi, all those triangulation with cellular, right? So it gives you the most accurate geolocation. Once you get that geolocation, you send it up to the AFC provider. The AFC provider is going to be responsible to search the FCC database based on your geolocation and find the open channels for you. When it comes back down, you're going to be able to see all the channels that are open and select the one you want, right? Now, all this seems kind of complicated, but guess what? It's all done automatically, okay? Now, one of the things that I want to point out why I call this big hitter number 2 is that if you look at the graph that I shown, right? The blue and the green graphs both show 160 megahertz transmission on 6 gigahertz. The blue one is transmitting at standard power. The green one is transmitting at low power. You can see how much bandwidth difference, right? Well, why is there such a difference even though they're transmitting 160 megahertz? You remember that MCS table that I showed you before, right? So because at low power, its attenuation is very short. So once it starts to get to a higher attenuation, it has to drop back on the MCS index, right? So instead of MCS 13, 11, it may drop to MCS 6, right? So the more you drop back, the less bandwidth you get, right? So you could see the big difference in bandwidth comparing low power to standard power. That's why really AFC is a big hitter in terms of benefits to your subscribers. Go to the next slide. The last big hitter I want to show you is on the 240 megahertz and 5 gigahertz, right? This is probably, maybe for many of you, this is the first time that you heard that you could be transmitting at 240 megahertz on 5 gigahertz spectrum, because you are so used to hearing that, hey, on the 5 gigahertz, the maximum you can transmit is 160 megahertz, right? Well, there isn't any particular reason you cannot transmit more. It just means that you have to extend yourself to the DFS channels in this case, right? But you could see the bandwidth is 50% more by transmitting 240 megahertz, okay? So for example, if you have a whole home coverage where you want to deploy a mesh and you want to connect it with obviously more than a gig of speed because you have so much Wi-Fi bandwidth. So in this case, let's say 2.5 gig, right? And let's say if you haven't queried the AFC on the 6 gigahertz, so on the 6 gigahertz, you're still transmitting a low power, then you can take advantage of this 240 megahertz on the 5 gigahertz, because 5 gigahertz has always been able to transmit at standard power, right? So this basically augments the fact that if your 6 gigahertz is not AFC yet, you can actually get more bandwidth. The other thing that we talked about before is the MLO, the multi-link operations. In a simple way to describe MLO, if you're familiar with Ethernet, it's like link aggregation. Okay, so you're basically bonding a whole bunch of links together. In this case, in Wi-Fi, you're bonding different spectrums together. So you can bond the 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz together, right? So even in an MLO operation, having more bandwidth on the 5 gigahertz obviously would help you substantially. Okay. So those are the big 3 hitters that I want to take you behind the scene to take a look at, right? So let's talk about the couple of slides about the Calix products. Next slide. So Calix has 2 products in production, the Wi-Fi 7 XGS as well as the 10 gig. The only difference is the WAN interface, right? One actually has XGS PON built into it. The other one has Ethernet 10 gig built into it. Now, most of the time when you see this tri-band product, right, the PHY rate is about 19 gig, right? In our case, it's 21 gig, thanks to the 240 megahertz transmission on 5 gigahertz, right? And then on the LAN side, sure, we have the 10 gig E and also 4 by 2.5 gig, right? Some of the routers out there, they have the 10 gig E, but rest of the ports are gig E based, right? As I've shown you before, when you have 2.5 gig, is really advantageous because you can connect meshes around your house at 2.5 gig speed rather than gig E. That gives you true multi-gig whole home coverage. And then if you look at the left-hand side with all the bullets, many bullets, but the last one I point to is really the computing power of this platform. So I'm going to show you that my last slide. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is just a summary of all the capabilities, right? Of some of the key capabilities. So you can see that the computing power of this platform is tremendous because it's a quad A73 processor. So it's running at very high speed, give you 45K DMIPS, right? So basically future-proof any additional features coming in the future. And as I talked about before, right, 240 megahertz, that gives you total PHY rate at 21 gig. In terms of the design of the product, one thing you know, deploying Calix products, we only use high power front-end modules, right? Because we want to take full advantage of the FCC limitation of 36 EIRP dBm, okay? And then the 4 2.5 gig port, we talked about it already, is really advantageous if you want to connect satellites, wire up some satellites around your home. And then finally, the AFC that we talk about, tremendous difference transmitting at standard power versus low power. One thing I want to say about AFC, so Calix already have this service available to you, right? You don't have to find an AFC service provider. Calix is the one-stop shop. When you buy a GigaSpy, you want to go to standard power, Calix will provide that service for you also. So with that, I'm gonna turn to Bob.
Appreciate it. Thanks, George. Thanks for all the like. I always find those of you on this call that know me, I think I'm pretty intelligent, and then I start talking to George, and I feel less so. So George, thanks for breaking that down for us and showing us the whys that Wi-Fi 7 is going to be so great from a performance perspective and broadband speed perspective. If we go to the next slide, I'm gonna. My message really when we think about it is, hey, a lot of that stuff sounded pretty technical and scary, and how the heck are you gonna manage it and deploy it? Well, it's the same Calix Cloud. When we look at the things that we do in reference to Calix Cloud, from Service Cloud to Operations Cloud, Engagement Cloud, Wi-Fi 7 doesn't change any of that, right? You still get the same actionable insights, the same information, the same ability to engage and talk to your subscribers and support your network and their experiences. And Wi-Fi 7 just happens to come into play. Next slide. The really big other benefit is it's the same platform. All we're doing now is adding in new units that have a tertiary set of antennas from a band perspective to employ 6 gigahertz and enable the benefits of Wi-Fi 7, but it's still the same operating system. So it's still EXOS. It's still the same management platform, Calix Cloud perspective. They still interoperate and mesh. Obviously, if you meshed a Wi-Fi 7 system with a Wi-Fi 6 system, you're not going to be able to use the 6 gigahertz backhaul as an example, right? But nonetheless, it's the same platform, though would you really use 6 gigahertz for backhaul? It depends, right? We all know, and George was mentioning this as we were prepping for today, it, like 5 gigahertz doesn't go as far as 2.4, same math for 6 gigahertz, right? The higher the frequency, the less it can travel. So obviously all of those things have to be taken into consideration, but at the end of the day, it's the same platform. For those of you that started out with, let's say, a GigaSpire 6.1 and went to the GigaSpire U10X, no change. It's the same operating system. The only thing that changes is the hardware that really you don't interact with outside of just testing from a performance perspective. Next slide. Like I said, the same insights. When you look at all of that cool technical stuff that George went through around 6 gigahertz and how wide the channels are, and 5 gigahertz and getting a new width on a channel, all of that stuff is handled by EXOS, the operating system. That none of that are manual decisions you have to make, right? If 6 gigahertz is enabled and we've turned on the AFC service, Calix Cloud and the GigaSpires and EXOS are going to take care of all of those complex decisions on how does the system provide the best wireless experience for the connected devices and the subscriber using them. All of those get made at the platform level on EXOS, and all of that data gets shared up to Calix Cloud, just like you can see today. If there are devices connected, you can see which band they're on inside Service Cloud. And in fact, Service Cloud, as this example, has supported 6 gigahertz for almost 2 years, right? When we deployed the 6E solution. So really what's changing is actually the physical hardware inside the home and enhancing the operating system to now make more complex decisions on providing a great experience to the subscriber, right? Should that device use 6 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, or 2.4, et cetera, all based on its needs and what's best for it, coverage, those types of things. Next slide, John. One of the great things, right, is installation, right? You know, a great experience starts with great installation. So having integrated tools such as the Calix Field Service app that is included with Service Cloud at no additional cost. It's in, just for clarification, it's in early adopter now. It has been for 3 quarters and most likely going to full availability in the November release 24.4. But having those same insights for performance, right? When you get, like I touched on briefly, 6 gigahertz doesn't travel as far. So as 6 gigahertz devices start to become prevalent in the market, you know, especially around Wi-Fi 7, that install is going to be a little bit, quote unquote, more complex. But having those insights to know that the operating system of the residential gateway in the home has chosen the best connectivity options for each client, and seeing that they're all green and healthy, and having that direct integration is going to really ease the deployment of new devices. Also, when we talk about deployment of new devices, some of your subscribers will get, you know, in let's say October, when the new iPhone comes out, and if it does come out with Wi-Fi 7, which is the rumor, some of your subscribers will know that, they'll hear the buzz term, and they'll call you and want Wi-Fi 7. Most of your subscribers will never know nor care, never even ask about Wi-Fi 7, but there will be a small contingent that will. So let's say a subscriber does get a new iPhone and calls you and wants Wi-Fi 7 from you and you're offering it, that swap process of taking an older GigaSpire to a new GigaSpire is still the same. You don't lose any configurations. They plug in the Wi-Fi 7 unit. All of the configurations from the old, I'll air quote old, Wi-Fi 6 unit get preserved, same SSID. Now it's just split across 3 bands instead of 2 bands, right? So that same unified harmonized SSID in Service Cloud. If you, for some reason, need a 6 gigahertz dedicated SSID that's not harmonized, you have the ability to create one just like you can 2.4 and 5 today. All of that is the exact same. Next slide. I like this one because, again, most of your subscribers today will never need to take advantage of multi-gig because you're not necessarily offering multi-gig, right? The most common highest speed broadband service tier today is gigabit symmetrical on GPON or even XGS-PON. But with XGS-PON, as we know, you now have the ability to offer up to 10 gigabits per second on the WAN side. Well, that's a scenario where if you did have multi-gig services today, your end subscriber is going to run a speed test and expect multi-gig capabilities. Well, we already support that today. So the great thing about that is it's the same command IQ to manage these new units with the ability to support multi-gig, which we've had in production with our existing units for many releases now. Next slide. As we get into higher gig services, FCC funding, such as BEAD was mentioned earlier, same FCC performance testing, right? That doesn't get impacted at all by Wi-Fi 7. It's the same set of hardware, right? Same operating system, same Calix cloud, same FCC testing, all of those things. Nothing changes for you other than you're just offering a new EXOS powered GigaSpire that supports Wi-Fi 7 and 6 gigahertz. Next slide. And I think that's it for me. Turning it over to Megan.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. So I am going to talk to you a little bit today about, so we've seen some incredible capabilities. There's a lot to think about. How do we think about marketing strategy? So John, next slide, please. So there are so many ways in which you can bring Wi-Fi 7 to market. How do we go about driving a marketing strategy that produces not only the best ROI for your marketing spend, but is also just super compelling for your customers? One of the most effective go-to-market methodologies in general is to take a data-driven segmentation approach. The first step of this process, the segmentation approach, is to examine who your subscriber base is. You can do this by looking at user behavior insights and how many children do they have in the home? Are they in an MDU or a condo? Do they have parental controls in place? And then that can lead you to crafting your messaging that speaks to how the technological advances you're bringing to market will make their lives easier, make their lives more efficient, and just overall better by addressing pain points. Think about the markets you serve today and the markets you're growing into and what demographics you are serving. How do you contextualize the advantage of Wi-Fi 7 in terms of your customers' connected lifestyle? Next slide, please, John. Once you have in mind and you've defined the demographics that you're serving in your markets, and you've kind of landed on what is the subscriber profile you're targeting to acquire, the next step is to think beyond the tech specs of your offerings and consider how to win the hearts and the minds of your subscribers. Think of your service as the how wants and needs of your target audience will be addressed. The examples that I have here on this page are largely specific to a residential consumer, but you could also use this same thought process if you have a small business or an SMB line of business that you're serving. Small offices will need powerful Wi-Fi. They need to be able to collaborate online in their day-to-day, so that's a need. They want to be able to conduct work quickly and effectively so as to not spend too much time on one task and to really workflow. And then they want to be perceived as professionals. And I'm sure we've all been online where there's a jerky or a laggy video, and that doesn't come across quite as professional as it does if it's a crisp, clear image. You can be directly responsive to these emotional and practical wants and needs by offering Wi-Fi that eliminates delays and poor video quality, and then enables the workers to use collaboration tools like Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, etc. And if that is part of your messaging, that speaks to how you're solving pain points in their day-to-day lives. This is really one of the most effective, really personalized ways that you can go to market. All right, John, next slide, please. So let's take a closer look now. I know John called out a work from home persona, also a gamer persona at the front where he says, who is this going to benefit? So a gamer is a really excellent persona to dig into to see how can Wi-Fi 7 positively impact their lives and really be responsive to their wants and needs. So a gamer, when we think about their wants and needs, this is just a really high level list. Your list might look a little different, but gamers need low latency. They may have multiple gaming devices to connect concurrently, or they may be a family of gamers. And so they have multiple gaming systems. They want their system to be prioritized for bandwidth. They also value security. They don't want hackers interfering with their gaming and their entertainment. And they want maybe above all to have someone to call to fix the problem when something goes sideways. So John, next slide, please. And I know this is a build. So here's a full solution just for, this is again a sort of a thought exercise, but here's a full solution that solves for a lot of the gamer concerns and pain points. Some other thoughts on how to position a gamer solution is that this offering could also address the needs of the parents of gamers who don't want to interrupt gaming traffic for their kid, but also need to get on a Zoom call or do something on a high bandwidth type of application. Or they have a family that has a 4K TV and they're getting into those more bandwidth requiring device types like 8K TVs. How is this going to solve for their high volume streaming? And then there are all sorts of home life needs that I would craft my marketing messaging to so that the subscriber sees themselves in the description. And I don't really go into what sort of channels, but you could think about how do you push messaging versus your Command IQ app or your subscriber application. How are you utilizing email effectively? And how are you showing up? What sort of messaging are you crafting based on the channel it's being consumed in? And so then one final slide next, John, we'll talk about pricing. So as we're considering the packaging step of your go-to-market process, this is just an example, high level, of how you could structure your pricing strategy. So if you, as the service provider, are investing in this high performance, high horsepower technology, your pricing structure should be in line with that investment. In this mapping, I've assigned Wi-Fi 7 to gamers and to trailblazers, or the early adopter technophile consumers. Both subscriber demographics that fall under those two categories, gamers and trailblazers, they will understand the value of Wi-Fi 7, and therefore their willingness to pay will align with that understanding of the value. Another way to deliver value for a premium price point could be to enhance the white glove nature of the service level I offer them. Maybe they have access to your most seasoned field techs and are given priority treatment for service calls. You could also do things like invite them to be the first to try new products or take part in focus groups to give you their opinions, because everybody likes to offer an opinion. In all cases, messaging to them would call them out as special. So this was a quick and easy, just very high level way. This is just a few ideas of how to market Wi-Fi 7. As John mentioned, I'm on the success team. I have a team of success managers at Calix. We'll be so happy to have more of a one-on-one conversation with you to craft something more specific to your business goals. If this is of interest, please reach out to your salesperson to line up an engagement with us. And John, that's all I've got. I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Bob and George. Great presentations, and thanks everyone for the questions coming in. So I want to open it up. I have a few questions that I can start with that have already been posted, and I'll ask Bob, if you don't mind, Bob, to readdress the installation certificate question that came in so everybody can hear the answer on that.
Yeah, so there was a question in the question poll. Hey, can you tell us, I'm paraphrasing, sorry. Hey, can you tell us a little bit about the installation certificate PDF? So the Field Installation app is a tool that is a set of guided best practices for install. That could be install of an ONT and a residential gateway, just a residential gateway. It could be a few different options. It also has the ability to do support functions if you did have to have a technician, and it's integrated to Calix Cloud. So for example, during the install, if you want to validate the residential gateway, it connects to Calix Cloud and says, hey, it's on, allows you to run a speed test, etc. At the end of that guided best practices for install, it captures all of the data from each of the steps, including did you take a photograph of the ONT wiring, etc., and then generates that, uploads it into Calix Cloud, and then it's available from there to be, you can download it as a PDF and attach it to the technician, the service technician from your billing system, to the subscriber record in billing, etc. So it's a great tool to, one, spot check installs to make sure that they're being done correctly, as well as what if that subscriber calls 120 days after the install? You now can see what's changed from a Wi-Fi performance perspective inside that home. So it's great for a lot of aspects around best practice installs and support post-installation.
Great. Thank you for that, Bob. And I'm going to ask Sunny to push the final survey out, folks, and I'll still keep going through the Q&A, so hang tight with us, but go ahead and respond as you can. So I'm going to go to a question regarding availability of the Wi-Fi 7 products. So I'll take that one. So we actually announced these two systems. One is called the GigaSpire 7U10T, and the other is the 7U10TXG. Both of these products are available for ordering. They are not open on my Calix just yet, but you can order them through your account manager, and they can provide you all the details, pricing, and such. So they are available to order now. Second part of that statement is that we, since we did announce 24.3 a week ago, there is another pending announcement that will be coming out very shortly, but again, availability is now. So I'm going to post another question, or read another question here regarding specifically around the Wi-Fi 7 technology, George. So this one's coming to you. Can I connect two Wi-Fi 7 units back to back in a, say, business office? Paraphrasing
Yes,
again.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. There's no limitation on that at all. So Just like any Wi-Fi routers that Calix sells, it can also act as a mesh satellite unit. So
Yeah, and then the follow-up question to that is the frequency it will connect over, if it's using wireless, 6 gig, or will it be very dependent on installation locations?
yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the things that we implemented is really a smart backhaul algorithm. It takes into account the bandwidth, the RSSI value, and a bunch of other parameters to select the backhaul channels. So in situations that if you did not implement AFC on the 6 gigahertz and the two routers are a little bit far apart, that the RSSI and bandwidth for the 5 gigahertz looks better, it will connect on 5 gigahertz. And then in situations if you didn't implement AFC or at least the two routers are close enough and the 6 gigahertz based on all the parameters that we look at seems to be optimal, then we connect in 6 gigahertz. This is all done automatically, not something that you have to configure.
That's great. Okay, one for you, Megan. So a question about whether you can provide an example how your team had used data-driven insights to help a customer.
Oh, sure. That's a good question. Um, so we are really urging a go-to-market strategy with our customers to take a value-based approach, as I mentioned. And that means really embracing the more traditional marketing strategy of segmentation, which I went over a bit. And so diving into your subscriber data and understanding their behavioral trends helps to surface, what we can surmise is what they care about and what is of value to them. So I'll take, the family. We can. It's usually pretty cut and dry as to which households are families and have kids in the home, and so we can take a slice, an engagement cloud, and create some lenses to say, okay, I've got my my segment of families. How do I push, or what's the messaging that I want to push to families specifically that talks about experience IQ as being a great parental controls methodology, and can just having the power of control in their hands using Command IQ to set up a guest network if my kids have friends over. And how do I introduce Bark to those subscribers where they may not even know about it, but we can prevent some of the scary connected online life for kids for a little bit longer. And so we've definitely seen, larger take rates of these family solutions where you're no longer having to, first of all, your CSRs aren't having to have the conversation around, do you want this service tier? And then do you want this? And then do you want that? And it's not the constant and then. It's really more just solutioning, and it's one single transaction. So there's great benefit to just efficiency. It also doesn't feel like nickel and diming. So it's that kind of perception and brand that you're driving with your subscribers. And also, you can drive higher ARPU. And of course, that's set by how you're pricing your full-fledged solutions. But we've seen tremendous results where subscribers want you to a degree to tell them what they should have. Like Wi-Fi can be kind of a black hole. So this is really crafting what we know they want and need in their lives. And we've seen like sales targets exceeded by 3x, and BSPs said, okay, I'm going to just trial this in my markets. The trial went exceptionally well, exceeded sales targets, and raised ARPU by 20%. That would be just a single example I can think of. Of course, we have several more to speak to.
Yeah, thanks for that, Megan.
Mm-hmm.
George, a pretty involved question here, and I'm going to try to read it. And Buford, if I don't get this right, send in another note. So the question, George, is if we are designing networks that place XGS-capable OLTs, what is the general rule of thumb for distance propagation for an end user if we are designing 1x64 splits for the pending future release of Wi-Fi 7 devices?
Okay, so you have 10 gig 64 split, right? Is that the question?
It seems that's the way it's reading, yes. XGS capable OOTs with a 1/64 split?
Yeah, it depends on the service level you're providing. Obviously, I've seen service level of 1 gig, 2 gig, 5 gig, and 8 gig. So the higher the service level, you probably want to reduce your split substantially. So if you're providing, for example, 8 gig maximum, providing to individual houses, you probably want to reduce your split to 8:1 or something like that. So for 64 split, it's probably okay for 1 or 2 gig services. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, Buford, if that doesn't, just type in with the clarification. George, I'll continue with you because we touched on MLO, and there's just a question more about, do we support it, number one, so that's a quick answer. And then number two, can you just describe how that function works?
Yeah, absolutely. We support it for sure. The interesting thing about MLO is that by itself would be worth an entire webinar, because if you look at the number of MLO variants, there's like 5 or 6 of them. Okay, so there's the multi-link, multi MLO support. There's a single link multi ML support. So there are many variants, and we support all of them. Now, one of the interesting thing is that, like I said, it's really a big topic by itself. One of the things is that out of all the MLO variants, one of them seems to kind of stand out, called enhanced single radio multi-link MLO. And we can talk about that. Perhaps if you provide your contact info, we can talk to you individually, because it takes a while to explain how that works.
That's great. And sorry to do this, another one for you, George, is real world speeds for Wi-Fi 7 from our devices. So from our Wi-Fi 7 routers, do we have any data on the speeds that we're achieving? I know that we quoted 21 gig. Yep.
Yeah, we do. So obviously it depends on the distance that you're looking at, right? So with 21 gig, now you have to understand the 21 gig is combined of all 3 radios. If you're not using MLO, you could really only look at individual link, right? So obviously the highest bandwidth link would be the 6 gigahertz with 4x4 radio, gives you about 12 gig of PHY rate. So what we have seen in the real world environment, let's say, within a single room transmission, we see transmission as high as like almost 7 to 8 gig, okay, over the air. So that's substantial when you think about being able to do wireless 7 to 8 gig.
Great. Thank you, George. Let's see if there's one more. Okay, and I'll just, well, unfortunately, Anthony, I'm going to have to defer to account teams for pricing. List pricing, I will be able to iterate to all the attendees. I don't have it in front of me, and I apologize. I should have that information, but I will follow up with the attendees here. So need to wrap this since we're near the top of the hour. A couple public service announcements. So first and foremost, again, thank you for spending your hour with us. The conversation here can continue. It can continue at another webinar. We'll look at your feedback on the polls that you had provided. And we would encourage you, if you're attending Connections, we will be hosting a very specific workshop on Wi-Fi 7, inclusive of a roundtable conversation with some of your peers, as well as some of our technical leads. So I would hope that we see you there. And please, if you stop by the Innovation Showcase, stop by and say hi to us, and we can continue the conversation there as well. And thanks to all of our presenters. Thanks for the attendance. Have a great day.